Welcome to the Twinkle Talks EYFS podcast. Working in the early years is busy, funny, messy, and exhausting. Join me, Shána, some of the Twinkle EYFS team, special guest speakers, and other early years practitioners as we talk honestly about our experiences. Whether you're listening for CPD, on your commute, or to help you relax, Twinkle EYFS will share everything you need to know about all things early years. Hello, lovely listeners. It's Shána here from the Twinkle Talks EYFS podcast, here to bring you another wonderful episode with some fabulous guests and some fun games. Now, today we've got a wonderful guest called Stuart Cloke. He is a male nursery manager, among other things. And he's going to talk to us today about supporting our male practitioners. Very, very exciting. And before we get there, we're going to play a little game though. So you might have noticed there's a little something called the Olympic Games going on at the moment. Don't know if you caught that, but we thought it would be fun to see what early years practitioners would compete in if there was an Olympic sport for them. So this lovely segment is called What Can Early Years Practitioners Do That Should Be an Olympic Sport? Let's see what you said on socials. A lot of you said nappy changing. Yeah, definitely, we're pros at that. Hoop skipping. That's a new one. Should try that one as well. Dressing children / octopuses in wet weather gear. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Trying to get 30 odd children in those overalls for forest school as well. Definitely a contender. Glitter sprinkling. And in brackets, and hoovering after. Oh yeah, we're all pros at the glitter, right? Another of our lovely followers on socials has said collecting stuff in pockets. Oh, that should definitely be an Olympic sport. I'd get gold for that. Nose wiping. That would be a great sport. How many noses could we wipe in a certain amount of time? You can't be an early years practitioner at that. Catching projectile vomit in a bin. I mean, that's an interesting one. I hope not many of you have had to do that. Oh, this one actually makes me shudder as I think about what I had to do. Getting children out in a fire practice. Yep, that is a definite Olympic sport. It feels like it when we're in it, isn't it? Or getting the children changed if they have a PE lesson. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Yeah, lots of Olympic sports there I think we'd be very good at. All contenders. What would you get gold in? Let me know. Write in, join our Facebook groups where those conversations happened. Tell me what you would win. Okay, after that lovely warm-up game, here is the main event for today's episode. We're going to be speaking with Stuart Cloke about how to support our male practitioners. Take it away, Stuart. Hi, Stuart. Thank you so much for joining me today, especially on a wonderful sunny Friday. And that's quite rare in England. So thank you for taking the time to see me today. I'm really excited to talk to you because you have got lots of expertise in the area that we're going to be talking about. But before we even get there, could you please introduce yourself to our lovely listeners?
Yes, of course. Firstly, thank you for having me on your podcast. My name is Stuart Cloke, and I am a nursery manager or head of early years education, as my new title is. I'm based in the south of England in Essex, and I'm part of a small group of nurseries called Step Start Nurseries.
Wonderful. I love that. And I think this is a really important episode for us today to talk about. And again, so grateful that you're here because our listeners who might have been following us for a while might realize and remember that we have done an episode before about having male practitioners in early years settings. We don't want the conversation to stop there. You know, it's not just this one-off episode like, oh, tick, we've talked about male practitioners. This is something that affects early years, children, families, staff, like the community of it. And there was a shocking statistic when I did the episode before. 3% of nursery early years reception practitioners are male, you know, and the first episode was about
the experience of those practitioners and how they got into it. But I'm really excited to talk to you today because you've got so much management and leadership experience as well. How do we actually support the male practitioners once they're in? It's not just, all right, cool, tick, they're on the rota, fabulous. It's about supporting them and keeping them involved, even uplifting them and empowering them. So I wanted to really ask you, because this is something that you are well versed in. You lead your nurseries, you're part of senior leadership. From your experience, what is the current landscape for early years education regarding male practitioners? What's it like?
Yeah, I think you've obviously started on a really good point around the scary statistic that 3% or less in some areas and regions of the UK are male and make up the workforce, which, in 2024 is a very kind of sad and scary statistic. And we absolutely need to keep on having conversations and discussing and challenging and moving forward. I think the current landscape of early years education as a whole, anyway, it has changed over the last, well, post pandemic, over the last four years, and the sector as a sector has changed, and people, both female and male, are leaving the sector and dropping out. So, kind of that statistic really year on year is dropping. And I think in some areas it's as low as 2%, 1.8%. And I just think, it hasn't really improved over the last 20 years. And when we really look at other areas of the world, a lot of countries like Norway and Germany are doing huge amounts of work with their gender equality policies and kind of really pushing gender equality in all sectors, but their kind of national average for males in early years has kind of increased up to 8 to 12%, which is, still low, but, much, much better to where we are as a country. And I just think, the current landscape really is changing and shrinking for males in early years. And I think we definitely need to have more conversations, more open discussions, and more strategic overviews of what can be done to not only recruit and bring in more males into the sector, but also retain them.
Yeah, it's only like half the conversation, isn't it? It's like half of it is bringing them in, the next bit is keeping them. And I feel like that's, like you said, the same for kind of all early years at the moment. We all know there's a massively high turnover, retention is really difficult, conditions are really challenging, and people are just finding other things because post pandemic, the whole work life balance, I think, has completely been flipped on its head. And it's really, well, I certainly for me changed my perspective.
Mm.
And it's like, from a leadership point of view and from your setting point of view, like, what are we doing to support those people? I'm really curious to know, what was your experience coming into early years? Like, how did it all begin? What drew you to it? Like, what support did you get?
Yeah, I think for me, and I always say this, it wasn't really a choice that I made or a decision I made. I just went into it and stayed in it and grew. I suppose stereotypically, which I'm sure we'll touch on as the recording goes on, stereotypically, I'm not a sporty, active football kind of guy, so kind of those typical work experience placements that we're offering just weren't appealing to me, and I just put a nursery down. I didn't really give it a second thought. It'd been something that I had thought about. My mum works in a primary school and has done for over 30 years now, and I used to go in and help and assist whenever I could, and kind of it was just something I was told I was quite good at, and it just seemed like a natural path for me. So I didn't really give it much thought when it came to kind of options and moving forward. It's just I tried it, liked it, and never looked back. And 16 years later, I'm still here, really. I have had a lot of support over the years, not only from friends and family, but also I've worked for some incredible companies and some incredible directors who kind of have really advocated and flown that flag for males in early years. And, I've worked with many great male practitioners, not as many as I'd like over the years. And kind of, I just feel like I'm incredibly lucky, and I do feel incredibly lucky that I've had that support wrapped around me coming into the sector as a minority, I suppose. And yeah, it's been great for me, but I understand it's not always the case for some people, and that is why sometimes people do drop out of the sector. Maybe they don't have enough support or have that advocate really kind of champion them, really. So yeah.
Yeah, and I remember speaking to the guys before on the other episode. They had similar stories. It's that some of them were really supported and they were really lucky, and others weren't so much. And it just seems to be almost like a postcode lottery. There's not really there's not a level playing field. It's kind of that kind of situation that we've seen so far. So I was wondering, especially from maybe your experience or the other male practitioners you've worked with or spoken to or built this community with, what are the main barriers, do you think? Not just about male practitioners even entering the early years sector, because we've spoken about that a lot and there's quite a lot. But then once you're in there, it kind of doesn't stop, does it? What are the barriers then for even staying in the sector or even progression?
Yeah, I think retention and progression are two really important factors within this discussion. As you said, it's not just about getting the male practitioners into the sector. It's about keeping them in there, growing them in there, and keeping them in the early years. Yes, it's important to have male primary school teachers and male influencers in primary school, but kind of at the moment that makes up around 15 to 20% of primary school. So I think at the moment we can leave that there and really focus on kind of the early years sector, because I think some people will think it's kind of a starting point, and for some people it will be, both male and female. Some people will go into early years to kind of gain experience to go on to teacher training, which is absolutely fine. We obviously need more teachers. There's a national shortage of them as well, so kind of that's not an issue as such. But what we really need to foster and kind of really ensure that we do is keep those really key male influences in the earlier sector, because they're so important. We could speak for a long time about all the positives that male early years workers bring to the sector, but in terms of working with them and speaking to them, some of it, is financial. The sector as a whole is notoriously underpaid and undervalued. We would love to give all of our practitioners, male and female, loads more money, but kind of there's a number of external factors out of our control, and unfortunately the early years sector isn't as recognised and as valued, because many of our settings that we manage are private nurseries and private settings that aren't a statutory service. Parents don't have to access them, children don't have to attend, so kind of often the funding and the wraparound support that we need isn't always there. So I think sometimes a lack of support, financial factors and financial barriers are a big thing, but I don't think it's always about money. I also think it's about kind of, as we touched on, the support that those male practitioners get once they're in there. When we're talking again on gender diversity as a whole, we as males coming into the sector are minorities in a majority. And for many other sectors such as science and technology, business, we have so many amazing women who are minorities in majorities. So I think kind of together, really, we all understand the struggles of gender diversity and gender inclusion. And so working really hard together to make sure that everyone, whatever your gender identity, is supported and championed and welcomed in the sector is hugely important. One of the things that we did as a company beginning of this year, and this wasn't the sole reason, but it was part of a wider discussion, is we reframed a lot of our titles. So we kind of got rid of the older titles such as nursery nurse, nursery assistant, and we reframed it as early years educators, because we really want people, especially young guys coming into the sector, to understand the impact that they can have from an early stage. And they don't have to have a qualified teacher status, they don't have to have a fancy education degree. They can have your college qualification diploma and a passion for the sector to really still have that impact. So kind of our apprentices, foundational early years educators, our level 2s are junior early years educators, our level 3s are senior early years educators. And we've recognized the importance that every role at every level brings. So I think kind of that's not spoken about enough in the sector and really valued enough. People will think that you're coming in and you're kind of just stuck in this role. And for some guys coming into the sector, staying at that entry level will be absolutely fine for them. But many do want to progress and many do want to develop. I, from an early stage, really knew that I wanted to get to this stage, and I worked really hard to get to that. And I've had challenges and I've had barriers, of course I have, but kind of I've got there. So it can be done. But I think as a sector as well, there is some potentially problematic elements within the sector itself. When we're talking about progression, I think a lot of males are sometimes pushed into roles such as forest school leader or sports coach, or working with our preschool children only. And I think for some males, we need to really embrace the sensitivity of the role that we do as well. It's not just rough and tumble play. It's not just forest school. All of that is great fun, and I love it just as much as some of my, female colleagues. But we've got to really embrace and support those men coming into the sector who are coming into it for a genuinely caring and nurturing role. I work with a fantastic guy called Ben at my setting, and he works specifically with our under ones unit. And, that's so fantastic to have and embrace and really work with, because he's got it, and that age group is his space and his tribe with his team, and the vibe that he brings is just amazing. So I think we need to be doing more of that and having more discussions around that, because some of the barriers aren't spoken about enough, and some people will just say it's money or it's progression. And I think, both of those are hugely important, but actually it's such a complex role and there's so many different strands to it that we just need to really explore that and make sure that whatever your interests or abilities are as a male coming into the sector, that there's something there for you.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it all really comes down to that open communication, isn't it? And it's like, say if you are in an earlier setting and it is female dominated, or in fact it's just entirely female and there are no males at all or any other gender, having that conversation and being like, are we inviting everyone in? We make sure that we do that for our kids. I think early years is quite special in that it's a very particular key stage that encompasses that whole embracing individuality and things like that. And it's like, great, but are we doing that for ourselves? Are we doing that for our staff? And I think you picked up on something that I've recently been thinking about, actually, is that it kind of really starts before we even are qualified. And I think a lot maybe has to do with as well how we're trained. So I had a conversation the other day with a friend, and it just kind of dawned on me. I did my PGCE, and so it's the year-long course after you do a degree. I did a degree in linguistics, so I was like, speech and language, communication language, phonics, all that kind of stuff. But then I did my year PGCE, where I was like 4 days in school, one day at uni, and that one day at uni you were supposed to learn the curriculum. We learnt the national curriculum. That was it. But our QTS says that we can be teaching down to 3. We're qualified to teach 3 to 11. But I honestly do not remember a single lecture that was solely about early years and even touched on the curriculum. It was like, right, we're going to do maths today. We're going to talk about fractions. And it was like, cool, great. What about us? And then it got me wider thinking about, okay, so there's perhaps some challenges in the courses themselves, but then also how are we encouraging male practitioners or any other gendered practitioners to actually come in and do these courses in the first place?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point around the pipeline of early years recruitment as a whole. I think kind of what we really need to focus on, as you said, isn't just about when those applications are coming through at an application stage, but actually hitting the pipeline a lot earlier for any gendered individual. It's really crucial that we kind of hit that early on. We're going into colleges, we're going into sixth forms, we're going into GCSE year, really to show people that it is a viable sector, that there is progression, that there is support, and for young people coming in, male, female, whoever coming in, we need to really show it as a viable and as a dedicated workforce that has got longevity in it, and it isn't just I don't know what I want to do with my career and my life, so I'm just going to go and work in a nursery. There's so much more to it, and I think more work needs to be done around the apprenticeships, and there needs to be more work around kind of the quality of the apprenticeships. There are some fantastic apprenticeship programs out there, and we work with a fantastic one that really kind of supports their apprentices at every stage of their journey. But I think sometimes apprenticeships are just kind of an underused route into the sector, and kind of maybe again it's stereotypes around apprentices and kind of what the caliber of those apprentices are going to be, and kind of what kind of impact that's going to have on the setting. But actually they are our future generations. All of our apprentices will eventually turn into our early years educators, into our senior early years educators, into our managers, into our owners, into whoever they want to be. And I think if we're not supporting the pipeline at the earliest stage, then really when it gets to kind of nursery level onwards, and post qualification level, it isn't gonna remain viable, and the retention rates are gonna drop because people will just get disengaged and disillusioned with the sector as a whole because they've just not had the training or the support or the recognition. So I think there definitely needs to be more work done in terms of the early years pipeline as a whole, really.
And I was just going to ask, did you say that you had experience in school-based early years and private-based?
So I've done like work placements in schools and volunteering in schools,
Yeah.
but my kind of, I suppose, my space is private early years and private education,
Yeah.
which I think is sometimes again looked at as quite a overworked, overstretched, underpaid sector. If you go and get a job in a school nursery, you will get more money.
Mm.
If you get a job working as a early years
Mm.
assistant in a hospital, you'll get more money. So I think we need to really, as a sector as well, and do some internal work around kind of, there's a space for everyone in lots of different ways, and kind of what's right for one person isn't right for another person. So I think we've really got to kind of look at it as a bigger, more strategic overview of the sector, really.
Yeah, because I was just intrigued to see maybe whether you'd seen a difference in the different kinds of environments that you'd worked in. So for me personally, I think I did a couple in private early years settings, but the majority of my career has been in school-based early years settings. And
Mhm.
in terms of my experience of that, it was always, the males were all up in key stage 2, more specifically year 6, and I would hear quite often
Yeah.
people would say it's because he will show them, not to mess with. That kind of, "Oh, you need a man up there. You need a man in year 6 because, they're getting older now and you need that authority." And that was the kind of subconscious condescension that we would get for both genders, implying that all men are rah, 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 big rough and tumble, and you have to have this almost toxic masculinity vibe to handle, quote unquote, older children. And it's like, oh yeah, no, you're a woman, of course you can't go up to year 6. No, they're not gonna. So that was the general vibe, subconsciously, and I don't think it was ever done maliciously. I think it's just something that's just been passed down. I'm wondering, what was the kind of environment or vibe for the private setting? Is it similar or is it different?
I think it's a little similar. I wouldn't say it's as toxic as that. I wouldn't say it's as deep as that. Absolutely, because I suppose there's a shorter range of kind of ages in the private sector, really.
Mm,
I fundamentally agree with you, really, in terms of that. If you look at statistically, and again, I don't think it's anything done maliciously by any school or kind of any setting like that. I think it's just a societal um, stereotype that's been put in place. You'll put your authoritative figure in the year 6 class, and you'll put your newly qualified, softly spoken female in your reception class, because that's what they feel they need. But
mm,
actually, there are some amazing, sensitive, calm, gentle reception teachers who are male, and there are some very authoritative, strict, stern female year 6 teachers. So I think we need to move away from that, really. In the private sector, absolutely, I do feel, again, it's often seen as, oh, we've got a guy, we'll put him in preschool, or, oh, we've got a guy, he can lead our forest school, or he can do football with the children. But actually, going back to the guy that I work directly with, Ben,
mm,
he wouldn't want to work in preschool, and he wouldn't really want to do forest school. He'd want to cuddle his babies, and he'd want to build those bonds with his babies. So, you know, we need to break that stereotype, and we need to challenge it internally as well. If we're getting it from external sources and we're getting it from internal sources, then really, the whole work is going to be so much harder to do, because no one's challenging, no one's speaking out, and everyone's just following the status quo and just going with it because it's what is expected. But I think not enough challenge and conversation is happening about that kind of stuff.
yeah, and like you say, stereotypes unconscious stereotypes as well as conscious ones, I do think play a massive role. And I know you mentioned earlier about like a gender equality or inclusion policy. This is something that I don't remember even having when I was in schools. Is that something that's becoming more prevalent? Is that where, say, for example, if settings were going to have these discussions in their staff meetings, in the SLT meetings, is that where they start the conversation?
I think it's a starting point. I definitely don't think we are there in terms of gender equality and a gender diverse workforce as a whole. Again, if we're going back to statistics, looking into other caring roles such as healthcare, nursing, healthcare assistants, care assistants, it's a higher percentage. 18 to 22% on average are male. But it's still not. I think it's still very much seen as a female role, a caring role, But what we've got to realize is, gender diversity and gender inclusion is so important, and it's so important for our children post pandemic, especially to make sure that there are sensitive, nurturing, caring individuals for our youngest humans on this planet that are both male and female or any gender identity, that kind of to support them and nurture them and nourish them and kind of champion for them. So I think, it's definitely a good starting point, but it needs to take action. Anyone can sit in a boardroom or in an SLT meeting or in a nursery manager's review and create a gender equality policy. Anyone can create a gender diverse policy, but actually it's the action that we take past that. Are we creating gender diverse and gender inclusive job adverts? Are we kind of creating gender diverse and gender inclusive workforce campaigns? Are we getting out there and getting the views and voices of a gender diverse workforce? And I think, yes, it's very important to have that conversation, but action needs to come from that, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I was thinking as well, there might be some listeners who are thinking, you know what, I do feel really passionate about this. Perhaps, I'm not a male practitioner, but I feel strongly to show my allyship and to support that. If they weren't in a leadership role or an SLT role, what can early years educators do to support this change and to support male practitioners?
I think it is just advocating in the strongest way, calling out biases, both conscious and unconscious, calling out and challenging stereotypes, again, conscious or unconscious stereotypes, supporting, checking in, mentoring. I'm lucky that I'm in a position that, if we are to get a new male practitioner come in or a new male aspiring leader, I'm there to kind of mentor and support and coach from a very authentic point of view, because we're in a similar situation. But not every setting will have a male manager or even a male member of staff in the setting. So kind of if they suddenly recruit and retain a male member of staff, then there needs to be a network of support that practitioner has. Obviously, for any practitioner coming into the setting, induction and enrollment and support is important for that, and training for anyone is vital. But again, if we use an example of a 17-year-old male apprentice coming into a 28 strong workforce of fiercely independent women who are kind of all very established in the setting, that 17-year-old male apprentice is going to feel extremely out of place and a very small fish in a huge ocean. So it's making sure that they're kind of got the support, got the coaching, got the mentoring, have regular check-ins, and as I said, just advocating, championing and calling out some of the outdated kind of biases and stereotypes that we have.
And I think as well, it's about that staff training. That's another thing I think that might be lacking from maybe the education sector, is about that inclusion and diverse sort of training that you do with your staff members. Because again, I don't feel like it's ever done ever maliciously, but it's about that awareness of those subconscious behaviors and prerequisites that we bring to the workforce that we don't even know. We could be doing things, and that could be, like you say, intimidating that 17-year-old boy who wants to come in. And I even just said boy there. It should be, is it young man? It's not 18, it's man. I feel like I don't want to say
Yeah.
boy. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a 17-year-old apprentice who's coming in ready to bring everything he has to the workforce. And then we might be subconsciously not making him feel welcome, not putting those things in place. And it's the simplest things of what the staff room looks like, or just making things that open space of neutrality where everyone feels included.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really key point. As you said, it's making sure that your spaces and places that your team use are supportive of everybody at any time. As you said, you know, a 17-year-old, you know, young man coming into the sector, walking into a staff room full of kind of flowers and very female stereotypical things, you know, might be a little bit overwhelming for him, and think, oh, I've made the wrong choice here. I'm not going to really sure what to do here. I feel very out of place. I feel very uncomfortable. But actually, you know, if we're making sure, as you said, that neutrality is there for individuals, then that's a starting point again, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually, yeah, a lot to think about, but it's really important to think about, and it's having that awareness. And I was wondering, from your perspective, if there is a male listener who's thinking about maybe next year going into early years, because you've sort of been through that experience. Is there anything that you would say, to them, to encourage them or empower them or support them?
Yeah, I think firstly, and what I would always say to anyone coming into the sector, regardless of who you are, is do your research to make sure that
Hmm.
it's a sector you really understand as much as you can understand from what you read. It's a sector that you understand how hard it can be and how tough it can be and how sometimes unrewarding it can be. But equally, the duality of that is that it is a really rewarding position and a job that brings so many benefits. I mean, what other job really can you say that you can do that you can care and educate and look after the future doctors, teachers, and prime ministers of the world?
Mhm.
You know, and if you don't want to do a job like that, then absolutely don't go into that job. But go into that job because you want to make a difference. Go into that job because you want to empower those young people to become the best citizens of the world, and go into it because you want to make a difference. You know, seeing that child grow up, go to school, and you might see them 10 years down the line in the street with their parents, and you know they're now, you know, aspiring footballer, or they're a mechanical engineer, or they're an artist, whoever, I think, don't underestimate how amazing the sector is and what all the amazing stuff that it can bring. But coming into it, just make sure you talk and communicate and kind of let people know if you're struggling with things, let people know if you're finding things hard, let people know if you think you're wobbling and you're not sure whether you're going to carry this on, and some people, again, both male and female, will come into it and realize actually it's not for them, and that's okay, that's fine. You can't win them all. And you don't want to keep people that don't want to be in the sector in the long term aspect. But if more work can be done to kind of really show them that it's a viable sector, that there is support and there is good places out there that will support you, we're not, as a sector, we're not naive to the fact that there are some toxic workplaces, toxic work cultures around there in the early years sector, just as there is in any other
Mm.
job. You could go into a horrible toxic office
Yeah.
environment, or you could work for the NHS in a really toxic management system. So it's not necessarily sector specific, but people, if you're struggling or you're finding it hard, don't always give up, because there is always light at the end of the tunnel. It just may mean you need to go on a slightly different path to get where you need to.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I think it's really genuine coming from you, especially because you've been through that journey. And even talking with you before we even recorded this, you were telling me all about the stuff that you do and the communities that you create. And I think that's really empowering, just as any practitioner listening to that being like, you know what, I might be a small fish in a big pond, and there might be a lot of things that need changing in the sector as a whole, but this is what I can do. So I would love for you to tell everyone, the opportunities and the communities that you provide as yourself as a male early years practitioner and leader.
Yeah, I think for me, being in this space for so long now, and it becoming a vocation and a career, isn't just a job for me. I will live, breathe, and eat early years every day. And I think I've spoken to you before about kind of, even when I'm with my friends out in social situations, who work in early years and who are in that space, will tell me, enough, Stuart, like, you're talking about work too much. I'll get enough early years at work. I don't need any more here. And I think that's because I am so passionate about it, and I can see the impact that people can have. And particularly as male practitioners, as my leadership skills have developed, and as my leadership ability has developed, and my confidence as a leader has developed, I've started kind of to just recently coaching and mentoring people in the sector, specifically focusing on young guys. I'm working with a fantastic room leader now, Ryan. A little shout out to Ryan there. That he's kind of a really up and coming name in the early years sector, and he'll go on to do fantastic things. But kind of he's in that very early stage of his leadership career where he's still kind of developing his confidence and his self assurance in that. So the fact that I'm able to help him with that and develop that and grow with that, I feel so privileged to be able to do that. And not just males. I want to help and coach and mentor anyone in the sector who may just want to find a better work-life balance, if that's a thing, or their confidence as a leader, or just generally anything. So I think, as my career has developed and as my confidence as a leader has developed, so has my intentions with what I want to get out of what I put in. And I absolutely, of course, still love going into the rooms and catching a break from the office and spending time with the children and seeing that impact that we all have. But actually, for me, a big part of my leadership journey now is that impact that I can have on the future generation of the sector, especially, young men, young guys coming into the sector thinking, is this for me? Can I do this? Absolutely, you can.
I love that. The fact that you do mentoring and coaching and just, what, here, let me help you. And I think you've got quite good social media presence as well. Like there's groups that you have, you chats and things like that, LinkedIn as well. I think you're really active on. And I think that's really quite encouraging to see.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is something that I'm really embracing, and it's a fairly new platform for me. And I'll always say this to people who kind of speak about it. I met a guy at the Early Years and Childcare Expo a few months ago, a guy called Jordan, and he was talking about LinkedIn. And I was quite honest with him and said, up until literally the week before the expo, I didn't get LinkedIn at all. I thought it was a waste of time. I thought it was boring. I thought it didn't really bring any value to anything that I was doing. And now I'm obsessed with it. I'm checking it at like 11 p.m. to see if there's any new notifications or anything that I've missed. I'm posting very regularly on there, and there's a huge community on there, and there's a huge network on there. There's a fantastic male early years network called Male Childcare and Teaching Jobs, run by another fantastic guy, Claudio, and he's creating this whole network of support and mentorship for everyone from young apprentices, male practitioners, young male apprentices and practitioners, to neurodivergent male practitioners, to fathers who want to come into the sector and see it as a career, qualified practitioners, leadership candidates. And there's a whole plethora of fantastic males in those kind of leadership and coaching roles that are going to work on this program. It's completely free to join. You get added into kind of social media groups, and kind of there's webinars and training. So kind of definitely, if you can access that, absolutely use it.
It's great. And I'm so glad you told me about that. I will definitely be putting a link to that in the episode description, as well as being able to contact you. So thank you for that. Before we go, though, I have a little sort of tradition that I have with all of my guests. blessed us with all of your experience and expertise. And we're going to have a little relax now and get to know you a bit, and we play a game.
Okay.
Are you up for that, Stuart?
Yep. Absolutely.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, we're in early years. Of course we love a game. Of course we do. So, teacher, would you rather? And the first question is always the same.
Okay.
I feel like it's a very teachery question, but here we are. Would you rather tea or coffee?
Oh, absolutely. I do love a good cup of tea.
Like special tea or just a builder's tea? Milk, no milk, sugar? Like, what's your vibe?
Oh no, just your bog standard milk, 2 sugars. Can't beat it. A nice cup of tea to start your morning.
Yeah, I feel like I can't start my morning right without a good cuppa. Although one of my friends got me one of those tea subscriptions most recently, and then
Oh yeah.
Bird and Blend. Oh my gosh, it's amazing, right? I got my month in last week. Chocolate digestive tea, Stuart, and it did taste like it.
There's just so many options out there now, isn't there? Like, it's not just tea now. You can have anything in your tea that you want.
You can, and then you can make anything into tea, and tea, honestly, it's crazy, but I would go with you on the builder's tea. No sugar though, but sometimes a little chalky digestive tea is great.
Nice.
Question number 2. This is all about you, because we talked a little bit before we started recording, and we got to know each other a bit, and we realized that we were both great animal lovers.
Yep.
So this one is actually making me laugh as I'm reading it. Would you rather a giraffe or a llama?
Oh, now that's a tricky one because we spoke about it, and they're both really, really top tier animals for me. So I would say, just because of the complete majestic nature of it, I would have to go with a giraffe.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you ever watch the Disney film Emperor's New Groove?
Yes. Yeah.
That is when I fell in love with llamas. And then I think a couple of years later, I went to an alpaca farm with my friend.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
oh my, it was the best. Like 400 alpacas just came, and they're so friendly. They come up to you and they're so curious, and they love cuddles and all of this. And
Yeah,
giraffes,
it's a tough decision, but I'm gonna stick with giraffe.
they are gorgeous, aren't they? They're ridiculously tall, but they are beautiful. I'm with you. I don't know, swaying on llama. No, maybe I'll sit on the fence with this one. I'm not sure. And then
Come
our
back.
last question. Yeah, ask me in a few hours, and maybe I've changed my mind. But the last question I love again, because this was something that we had in common. We love reading, and
Yep.
we were struggling to think of a genre here, so we've narrowed it down. Would you rather read a murder mystery or a historical fiction?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this because kind of I do flip between them. But I would say, I think for me, I'm going to say historical fiction, just because I think with a thriller, I think you get that instant hit and that murder mystery of who done it and what could happen. But I think once you've read it and it's kind of solved, that's it. Now you can't really go back to it as much unless you really want to, and kind of know before everyone else does. That's fine. But kind of, I think with a historical fiction, there's so many that span such a huge range of time, and I just think for me, there's so many amazing periods of history that we just don't talk about enough and know enough about, that I just think if there's a book about it and we can learn about it and still talk about it, fiction or non-fiction, absolutely. So yeah, definitely historical fiction for me.
I feel like you're selling it to me. I'm trying to think of any historical fictions I've read, and I don't think I have. What like your top historical fiction books?
I think there's, obviously, it's not fiction actually, it's historical non-fiction, I suppose, but like the Diary of Anne Frank. But there's also amazing historical fiction out there. The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna is a really fantastic book. And The Beekeeper of Aleppo, The Dressmaker's Gift, which is all about kind of World War II and all the secret resistance that goes on during that time, and it's just a really interesting kind of genre to really deep dive into if that's your kind of thing, really.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. But as you probably already guessed, I am in the camp of murder mystery.
Yep.
I am obsessed, Stuart. Like, my aim in life is to collect all of Agatha Christie's books, most specifically Poirot. He
Of
is
course.
king,
Yep.
right? There's no one better. David Suchet is the Poirot. No one else is Poirot. Okay, come at me on that. I will fight you. And then more recently, I've been trying to branch out a bit. So I've done the Peter Wimsey series, Lord
Oh yeah.
Peter Wimsey. That's another.
Yeah.
They're great. They're fun. Very similar. Obviously, Sherlock Holmes a classic, but then my favorite at the moment is the Richard Osman series,
Oh yes, the Thursday
the
Murder Club
Thursday
series. Yeah.
Murder Club. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh!
Soon to be
And
Netflix drama, I think, isn't it?
yeah, I've heard it's going to be a film produced by Steven Spielberg, right? And
Oh
I
wow.
heard Pierce Brosnan is in it. I've heard Judi Dench,
Yes, I
right?
have heard. Yeah.
I'm really excited. So, I need to start reading the fourth book because it's just come out in paperback actually, so I need to go and get it. But camp murder mystery all the way. Although I am intrigued about historical fiction, so I think I'm going to go and look up those books that you recommended. Sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely go and do it. Yeah, no, but I do love a good book generally anyway. Always reading something. So
Yeah, no, me as well. It's a nice pastime. Speaking of that, it's the afternoon. I think it's a smashing time to go and do some reading and have a little chill and relax as well. So I'll leave it there. And I'm sure this conversation will continue, hopefully, on our social media and LinkedIn. And it will just hopefully inspire others that are listening to openly have these conversations in our setting. So thank you so much, Stuart, for coming and for talking about your experiences and sharing your expertise. I know that our listeners and followers will want to see more of you and maybe even contact you and get in touch. Where can we do that?
So probably the best and most central place is LinkedIn. So you can connect with me, follow me, send me a direct message. Kind of, I'll accept anyone really. So just hit that follow and connect button. Start that conversation, male or female. If you're talking about early years, you've already got my attention. So.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'll make sure to put all the links to be able to chat to yourself, Stuart, in the episode links. And just thank you for coming. I hope you have a wonderful day and I'll see you real soon.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Well, there we are. A lovely episode, a really supportive, uplifting episode, I think. Stuart has got so much knowledge and so much passion for this sector and supporting males in the sector as well. Go check him out on LinkedIn. I know we've said that already, but he is uplifting his team, other male practitioners there, creating a real community. And that is what we do in early years, no matter what gender, right? So join the conversation, follow us on socials, and I look forward to the next episode. So whatever you're doing, have a great day. I'll see you soon. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you would like to join in or would like to know more, then come and find us on our social media sites. We have a Facebook page, Facebook groups, an Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. All the links of where to find us will be in our podcast description. Come and join the conversation. And whatever you're doing today, I hope you have a great day.